Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the current fundraising landscape, how to build a fund development plan for nonprofits. And we have Rosalind Zavares. And Roz, I feel like I chopped up your last name there.
It's okay. It's Zavris. Everyone always wants to add an additional vowel. So there's a lot of
Zavres.
consonants.
Thank you. Thank you for correcting me. So we have Roz here today who is going to present today's program. Roz is a nonprofit operations expert with over 15 years of experience building operational infrastructure for global and local social impact. She evaluates systematic challenges and designs new tools to overcome them. She also implements innovative strategies to help organizations grow. Some of you may know this, but just in case, Roz is also working with the New Haven Free Public Library. She is what is your title over there, Roz? Remember?
Entrepreneur in residence.
Entrepreneur in residence. And so Roz has office hours that are available at the New Haven Free Public Library. And so after today's session, if you are left wanting more, please seek out Roz's expertise, and you could tap into that at the New Haven Free Public Library. So thank you everyone for joining us. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Roz.
Okay, great. Thank you, Stephanie. And yes, as she mentioned, I am at the library every Wednesday from 1 to 3, and then virtually from 4 to 6 on Thursdays. So if you have any additional questions, feel free to book a 30-minute appointment with me. They are free and open to everyone. But today we are going to get into the current fundraising landscape. And the idea is that fundraising has really changed. It's been changing for years, but COVID, the current financial climate, everything is causing the way that we understand fundraising to be turned on its head. And so when we talk about building a fund development plan in 2023, it needs to speak to the landscape that we're in right now. And so we've already done introductions, as mentioned. Hello, my name is Rosalind Zavris. I have a small consulting firm called Europa Consulting, and we do finance, operations, HR, development, and even some IT support. So let me know if you have any questions afterwards, and me and my team are happy to support. So what are our goals of this session today? There are 3 big ones. The first one is let's review current trends in giving in the US. I have some statistics about the way giving has changed and the way that individuals are thinking about their donations, especially in this now post-COVID world. The second goal is to talk about community-centric fundraising and using that as a model for resiliency. If we have a community-centric and values-based approach, that actually will lead us into a fund development plan that can weather all of the challenges that the world continues to throw at us. And then the last and final goal is to discuss how we can create a fund development plan that works for you and your organization. And this is the biggest and most important thing that I want to emphasize. It has to work for you. Just because planned giving is a thing, that doesn't mean it's a thing for you and your organization at this moment in time. And so we'll talk about some tools on how to evaluate fund development and make sure that your plan is built on a solid foundation. Now let's do a quick review of giving. If you've been in my presentations or other presentations by the Community Foundation, this is probably a graph you're familiar with, but just in case you aren't, I always like to start here. Individuals contribute 70% of total donations to nonprofits. This is a really important number, and it has been consistent for over half of a century. And I say that and I emphasize that because individuals are actually the most consistent and stable donation that you can get for your organization. I know, especially when you're starting out, I know, especially when you're looking at, there's a grant application, grants often seem easy. I've had many clients ask, well, we should just only focus on grants because that's easy. We know where the money is coming from. Many grants take a lot of time and are volatile. Individuals are actually way more consistent. And as you can see, they encompass such a large portion of the giving pie. This corporation's 4.7 is small yet growing, and it continues to be the biggest new source of donations coming through. So let's talk about grants just for a second. Let's talk about the reality of grants. The reason I often say that grants are inconsistent and temperamental is because you are disconnected from the donors. If you think about it, a foundation has their donors and their investors, and they establish the priorities for grants, according also to the board. And if it's a family foundation, the realities of what the family wants to give. And then you are at this next line of that. So you are disconnected from the donors. And because of that, you might not know if the priorities of the donors change, if the priorities of the board changes. So oftentimes I've had many clients come to me in a rush because they were expecting a major grant, and then all of a sudden that grant disappeared in a very short amount of time. You know, they were talking to their program officer. Their program officer said that they were shoo-in for the grant next year, and then all of a sudden the priorities of the organization or the foundation has changed. Because you are so disconnected, it is something that you should, if you are heavily reliant on grants right now, put together a strategy so that that can become a smaller and smaller portion of your overall fund development plan. The other thing is that they take a lot of time. So one thing that we are going to discuss today when we talk about resilient and sustainable fund development is the time that it takes for you to do any one of these strategies. A foundation grant, these are averages, but it takes on average 30 to 50 hours to write a proposal for a foundation grant, and it could take longer. Granted, if you have language that you use over and over again, that helps reduce that amount, but every foundation and every grant application is different. They often need different language, or you have to change the way that you're discussing your programs to accommodate it. Whereas a state grant could cost you 60 to 80 hours, and a federal grant is going to be at least 120 hours, if not more. I recently helped a client apply for a very large grant from the EPA, and that took us about 2.5 months worth of work. So sometimes you have to genuinely evaluate, do I have the capacity to apply for this grant? And do I have the capacity to then manage the grant after its application? So that is why I de-emphasize grant funding as much as possible. So then why do Americans give? Why is it that 70% of total donations come from individuals and that hasn't changed in half of a century? It's because it's woven into the fabric of American society, actually. And so the Network for Good surveyed, a lot of organizations have surveyed Americans, but this is one of the really good ones, asking, why do you give? The top reason is someone I know asked me to give. Giving is very personal. You are wanting to support people you know, you love, and you care about. And so that is often the first reason anyone asks. The second reason is that we don't want to feel powerless in the face of a disaster. You know, the earthquake that happened in Turkey and Syria, floods that happen, fires, anything that happens in the world, we want to feel like we can help. And oftentimes we don't know how to help other than donate to an organization that is doing the good work. Another common reason is they want to memorialize someone, either because they're struggling with a particular disease, or maybe they recently passed away and they want to give in their memory. And then the fourth reason, most common reason, is that they were raised to give to charity. within a lot of our religions, a lot of our communities, a lot of our cultural background is around charity and social support. So as I mentioned, this is woven into the fabric of American society and a lot of societies around the world to become philanthropists. So if it's woven into us, what is the state of it? Now that, we are in this post-COVID world and there's, this war happening between Russia and Ukraine, global prices are being destabilized, it would make you think, okay, people are going to be giving less. That's actually not necessarily the case. 90% of donors surveyed in the Classy Why America Gives report said that they want to keep their donation the same or more, even though 49% of them have a pessimistic view of the economy. And with that, 39% are willing to sacrifice other areas of their budget to maintain their donations. And that's a powerful statement about the way that a lot of individuals conceptualize their giving. They want to make sure that they are giving to causes that are making a difference, even if that means reducing some of the other luxuries that they have in their life. And so why is that happening? Why is it that I continue to emphasize that that individual donors are going to be the most powerful source and the most sustainable source of your funding? And why is it that 90% want to potentially give the same or more, even if there's dire economic straits ahead? A lot of these trends also are because millennials are now the largest generation and they're working and they have income, and Gen Z now is also coming up into the workforce, and the way that these two generations are conceptualizing giving is also reverberating within the entire fundraising landscape. And the first part of it is that they are becoming more passionate about the causes that they support. Donors are no longer wanting to give to something just as a checkbox. They are excited about the work and they are displaying their donation as a part of their passion. And they also are believing more and more that there's an increased need, whether it's because, again, disasters, global climate change, or it's because of need within their community. Donors are believing more and more that the solution to the challenge is coming from social organizations. And although that has some implications in whether or not, there's a belief in the frailty of government, what donors are saying over and over again is, I trust local organizations, I trust nonprofits to do the work much more so than anybody else, and I trust them to create the impact that I want to see in the world. And a lot because of social media, because of the interconnectedness of everything that we have now, donors also believe that their causes are now even more relevant because that they can see the impact, even if the cause that they care about is a little further away. This emphasizes that we need to be thinking about donation from an impact perspective. It's not just about what it is I'm doing, but what is the impact that I'm creating? A lot of individuals will say words like the social ROI or the social return on investment. A lot of donors, especially millennials and Gen Z, see their donation as a social investment in their community, and the return is whatever impact your organization is making. So then let's talk about the other end of that. So if we're excited and we're passionate and donors are committed to giving more, then why do we have passive and lapsed donors? Again, from the same giving report, they found that 52%, so over half of donors that are passive, meaning they haven't given yet this year. They're not necessarily fully lapsed, but they haven't given again so far, is because the appeal is not timely. What does timely mean? That means You potentially give when there's a season to it, right? You know that there's an appeal in the fall, and you know that there's appeal in the spring, and the spring has happened and no one asked you. So the request wasn't timed with either what you're expecting or the ebb and flow of the organization itself. A great example is education nonprofits have a cycle, right? There's that follows the school year. So appeals can be timed pretty well with the ebb and flow of the school year. Timely appeals can also be based on current events. So as I mentioned in the previous slide and thinking about here, donors believe that there's an increased need and that their causes have more relevance. So you saw a large number of donors that wanted to give to food insecurity at the beginning of the pandemic due to the fact that public schools were closed, that all of these other spaces were closed. So requests to donors should be timely, and especially if you're an organization that's working on an issue that becomes a part of the conversation due to a current event, that's often a good point to point out your impact to your donors and see how their gift can increase impact. And then the other thing that I always emphasize, and in any workshop I give, I'll say this multiple times: thank your donors more than once. Thank them twice, thank them 3 times. Thank your donors. A gift receipt does not register as a thank you. It registers as a tax form. So if you're sending only a gift receipt, someone gave you a $100 donation, you say, here's a receipt, thank you for your gift, here's a receipt for your records. In a donor's mind, that is a receipt, that is not a thank you. And so when we're talking about thanking our donors, 4 times more likely to donate again if they were thanked. And that could be as simple as another email, maybe a week later, maybe it's a text, depending on who your donors are and what the system is that they use. We can talk a little bit more about what thanking looks like. But it is really important to thank your donors proactively and know that they understand they're being thanked. So, we've got 2 reasons people don't give. They weren't asked, they weren't thanked. Then the other 2 are tied into that, and are, I would say, maybe the flip side of those coins, which is donors don't necessarily feel special. And they maybe gave $5 because that was all that they could give. And maybe they'll have greater capacity later, but value every dollar. And we can talk about ways to do that in a sustainable manner. But donors should feel special. They should understand that their gift mattered and their gift created impact. And as a part of that, they will also say that they weren't engaged in some way. If a donor is giving money to your organization, they're excited about the work that you're doing. They are passionate about the cause. So find ways to engage them, even if it's not necessarily another donation. So this leads to the idea that modern giving is relational. We often can think of giving as a transaction. They donate on our website, we need to give them the receipt. We then invite them to the annual gala, and then they also get our newsletter. We need to think about the fact that our donors are excited about our cause, that they are excited to support the work that we're doing and build the community that you are trying to build. So how can we, here are some 6 principles of relational giving. And the next session that I give is going to dive into these a lot more, but I emphasize this because even when we're talking about building a fund development plan, let's build it on a relational and values-based framework. And so what does relational fundraising look like? We are matching passion and purpose. So again, I'm going to talk a lot about impact. What is the impact that your organization is making in the community, not just the activities, right? So if you're doing an after-school program as an example, the program is the activity. You bring kids in, you're doing this wonderful after-school program, they're enjoying themselves, but the activity is the the after school program? What impact are you making? Is this changing long-term outcomes for enrollment in college? Is it helping them increase standardized test scores? Are they just happier? Right? You can have something such as the kids come in and they're kind of down, and at the end of the day, they go home and they're happy and they're well fed. That is impact. Right? It doesn't necessarily need to be these hard statistics numbers. It's what do your donors care about, and how can we demonstrate that their donation is connected to the impact that they want to see. Building trust is really important with your donors as well. They are trusting you with their money, and especially as we were talking about the economy's waxing and waning. So they are choosing to donate to you and not go to Starbucks, buy that new iPad, et cetera, et cetera. So how can we build trust with them? The best suggestion that I have is transparency. How can we make sure that we're being as transparent as possible so that they know their dollar is being utilized well? As I said before, value every dollar. I know that if you've ever been in fundraising or seen the traditional fundraising pyramid, the idea is you have donors coming in at a low level and they'll move up the pyramid over time. That's actually being proven in the past decade. The donor pyramid is no longer the way that donors are interacting with us. Because of social media, because of the way that people are finding out about the work that we do, someone could come in at a $5 donation and then hop all the way to the top and be able to give you a $50,000 donation if they're asked. And our understanding of wealth has also changed quite a bit. So make sure that you're valuing every dollar, because you never know who that $5 donation might turn into a major donor, or they might be able to connect you to a major donor. So giving is social and individual. As we mentioned, the top reason people give is because someone they know asked or is working on this project or cause. And build long-term relationships with your donors. Make sure that you know what they're interested in, what they like. Find ways to get to know your donors as well as they are getting to know you. And then finally, and this is my favorite, embrace cooperation. I'm a very big proponent in cooperative and shared resource models because we can learn from each other. So say you are working, you are a new organization working on food reclamation. Maybe talk to other organizations in the neighborhood or in the state that are doing food reclamation and what has worked for them, what has resonated with their donors, and are there things that you can learn from each other? Some people counter with, well, we have a small pot of donors. And again, because of social media, because of the way that we're moving these days, the pot of donors is a lot bigger than it seems. All right, so I said one of our goals is to understand some values-driven approaches and why I would argue that community-centric fundraising is a more sustainable model in the long term. And community-centric fundraising means that your community that you're serving is a central part of your fundraising plan. So that means your marketing efforts, were your community consulted? Was your community consulted when you put together language that's on your website? When you have an appeal that's written particularly to support an initiative for your community? Did you get their input? Making sure that the way they describe themselves, the way that they feel about the programs is highlighted. A lot of individuals within the fundraising community are really pushing this idea of storytelling, letting the communities speak. So who are the individuals that you're serving? Letting their voices come up and be heard through videos, through, if you have social media savvy, doing reels on Instagram or TikTok. There's also something really powerful with just a video on your phone asking individuals how they're feeling and what they're thinking. Other stories can be written stories in email or in mail campaigns, but making sure that the community, the voice of the community, is central and core to your fundraising efforts. Another values-driven approach is focusing on equity within your fundraising. And that means putting together a fund development plan that works to address and dismantle the biases that exist within the fundraising process. Oftentimes our boards, our major donors, do not look like the community that we're serving, or all of our board and our donors are from the same neighborhood, from the same city, work at the same job. Let's really think about how can we dismantle this idea that there's one direction to fundraising, that it's wealthy down. How can we include our community and diversify the individuals that are on our board and the donors that we have? That will increase not only our donations, but you hear, bankers say all the time, you need to diversify your portfolio. Well, let's diversify our fundraising portfolio, both in terms of the gift vehicles that we have, but also the individuals that are a part of the process. I do see that there's some chat going on. I just want to let you know that we will be doing, I will leave enough time for Q&A and discussion at the end. All right, so what are some principles of equity and value-based fundraising that we can sort of hold on to as the bedrock? As I mentioned, listen to your community. I love showing my fundraising campaigns to the individuals that I serve and say, what do you think? Does this resonate with you? Do you have a different way of saying this? You'd be surprised how many great ideas come when you ask individuals what they think. Oftentimes we get stuck in a cycle of, okay, this is our annual appeal. We always say this, we always do this. It has been successful. Yes, it has been successful, but if the question is how can we earn more, how are there different ways that you can involve new voices into the fold? And embrace transparency. So this is one of the principles that I promote and I get a lot of pushback on, not because people are shying away from transparency, but there's fear. If our financials are available on the website, then our financials are available. And what if someone doesn't like that we spent this amount of money on chairs last year? And I understand that that can be scary, but it's also an amazing way to get new donors. There have been a large number of donors that say, and again, this is Millennial and Gen Z, much more so than some of the other donors, but actually Gen X is the same way, that they won't donate if they can't find the financials of the 990 on the website. When I talk about building trust, this is a great way to build trust, that you have an annual report, your 990s are able to be easily found. There are wonderful tools such as Candid, GuideStar, where maybe you don't want to put all this on your website and maintain it, but you can post your 990 and post information about your program on these websites so that if donors are looking, they can find information. It's not necessarily about saying, I have this percentage of my budget is coming to program or G&A. It's just about saying, this is what we've spent. This is how we've managed your funds, and this is the way that we are being stewards. And now promote collaboration. Again, I said I'm a collaborative model person all of the way. I have another presentation that I give on fiscal sponsorship and why I think fiscal sponsorship is the way of the future, in that it's a shared resources model. And the more that we can share resources in the nonprofit community where resources are so limited, the better we all are. Find ways to do benefits together, to share staff. We are all short-staffed. We all have short budgets. So what are ways that we can support each other and then increase our overall impact together? And then the last piece is create multiple ways to give. As I mentioned earlier, let's value every dollar. Our donors are excited about our work, but maybe because this month they don't have the money to give, that doesn't mean they don't have something to give. Another thing that I say in my workshops is your volunteers are your donors. And so your volunteers are donating their time. I'm not talking about from an accounting perspective of recording the value of the hour and putting it on your books, but rather our time is our most precious gift. And if your volunteers are giving that to you, think about them as donors. Think about ways to honor their commitment and highlight everything that they're doing. So maybe you have a donor that can't give, but they would be really excited to help out on a Saturday. Also thinking about it with your fundraising campaigns. Some donors might not be able to give, but they sit there and stuff envelopes with you, and find ways, again, to support your work. One organization I work with calls this their giving menu, and that's what they put on their regular newsletters. Say, here are all of the wonderful ways we need your support. We need mentors for our student programs. We need computers. Do you have an old computer sitting around that we can clean up? We need support on this letter writing campaign because we're trying to change this policy. So if you can't give money this month, here are all of the other ways that we need to give. And it's just a part of their newsletter at the end of every month, and it is incredibly successful. So I'm coming back to community-driven giving because this is also a point that I really want to hammer home. We give because we are connected to it, and we're usually connected to it through our communities. And remember that our communities are growing and growing. You're much more connected to that cousin that lives in Boise, Idaho than you used to be before because you can see what they're doing every day on Instagram. And so, the Case Foundation did a really wonderful study. This was a few years ago, but it's still pretty relevant on millennials, Gen X, and boomers and how giving is changing between those three very large generations. And millennials, which again are the largest population, they're now really going to be our primary source of giving. 9 out of 10 are more likely to give organizations that prioritize community involvement and impact. Right? So gone are the days of thinking about I'm giving this widget to the community. Millennials want to know, did the community want that widget? Are they excited about their widget? And how did that widget change their lives? And 3 out of 5 donors want to give to causes their family and friends care about. Facebook capitalizes on this during the Facebook birthday fundraising donation drives. This is an incredibly popular vehicle of giving because people like to support people and people that they know. So since I continue to emphasize being community-centric, since I continue to emphasize having an equity-based approach, here are 3 questions that you can take with you and think about your current fundraising plan and whether or not there are ways you can change it and make it more community-centric or equity-focused. So the first question is that I posed earlier, but are members of the community you serve consulted, informed, and collaborated with in your efforts? You don't need to make it this big thing where you create an all-day workshop. It can be something as simple as if you're a direct services organization and you have a client walking in the door and you're working on a new brochure, ask them to look at it. If you are planning a gala and you're going to be highlighting all the successes of your program this year, maybe ask your community, what are some things that you would like to see highlighted in our presentation? From an equity perspective, look at your top 5 donors, maybe your top 10 donors. What do you know about them? Especially if they're your top donors, you probably know a good amount about them. Do they come from the same town, the same school? Do they all work at the same organization? If that's the case, how can we get 5 donors that are different in some way? Maybe everybody went to UConn. Well, that's great. See if we can find someone that went to the University of New Haven. Or are there other ways that we can bring in new individuals into our organization? Then the third question, if you have diversity and equity training for your staff, consider inviting your board and your donors. it is actually a wonderful opportunity to connect with your top donors or any of your donors and say, we would love you to be a part of this effort. Do you want to learn more about us? And do you want to learn more about inclusion practices? So think about these things when you're looking at your fundraising practices, and are there ways that you can find small steps to move towards these two goals? All right, so we've talked a little bit about current stats with fundraising. What does it look like to support fundraising in 2023? And how can we take into account the way that millennials and Gen Z are giving and many changes in Gen X? So now that we've talked about that, how do we build a fundraising plan that is feasible for you and your team? And I want to emphasize feasible in everything that we're going to be talking about. We all are resource strapped. It is very difficult to do fundraising. It's very difficult to fundraise because of the way oftentimes grants are worded, donations are worded. So we have a little money or a little bit of resources to do a lot. And so the building blocks of a feasible, sustainable fundraising plan, 3. And then obviously there's more detail under it. But create your case for support. You probably know it in your head. You know exactly the work that you're doing. You know that it has an impact. You can connect it. Can everybody in your organization that's working on fundraising state your case for support? And does it check your assumptions? Recognize your own capacity. Please, please, please understand what your strengths are, what you do really, really well, but also what are the learning edges for you and your team. If you've never put together an annual gala that is a black tie event, is that necessarily something you want to take on when you have limited resources? Also, understand your donors. When I said modern giving is relational, it is very, very relational. Understand who they are, understand what motivates them, because then you can build a case to that. So let's dive into each 3 of these things so we can talk about how to build them and how to recognize when we have a fundraising or fund development plan that is built on these 3 pillars. The favorite question that I get from my clients is, so how can you articulate what you need and why you need it? And also, is that what we should be saying? Do I need to say I need 15 chairs for this program? And if I say I need 15 chairs, does that mean then that it's a restricted donation? I'm not talking about that level of articulation. I'm talking about connecting the idea that what you're doing has a cost to run it. If we could all work for free, if we could all do everything that we do for free, I'm sure many of us would do it. But the reality is things cost. And especially with inflation, it's hitting nonprofits the hardest, right? So how can we first articulate what it is that you need and then the why? Remember that current donors are excited and passionate about your work, which means that they are excited to know how their support helps you do what you do. So let's create our case. First step, define success of the program. So there could be an entire workshop just on this first step. And there are individuals called monitoring and evaluation professionals that this is all they do, is talk about success and metrics and build plans and workshops to determine all of these. So the fact that it is one bullet on this slide does not do it justice for how much you could delve into this. Let's focus on it as one bullet in this slide for now. How do you know that your program is successful? Simple question. How do you know that today was a successful day, tomorrow isn't successful? And how do you know that you're making progress towards your overall goal? As an example, you are an animal shelter, and the challenge that you've identified is that you are trying to ensure that all stray cats and dogs are adopted and that there's a reduction in the overall stray population in the greater New Haven area. What does success look like? Success would be there are no more stray cats and dogs. And that every cat or dog that lives outside is spayed or neutered. Right? And so once you know, okay, this is what we're working towards. This is a challenge we're trying to solve. This is what success from that challenge looks like. You can then start to create your case to say, I know what success is, and I know how to measure that we're working along the road to success. A lot of what we're working on is intractable. So we're trying to eradicate hunger. That's wonderful. That is a goal. That is not success of your program. That is the overall impact that you want to see in the world. So when we're thinking about success, this acronym that we all need to think about is it needs to be SMART. And you might have heard this before, maybe not, but SMART is specific, measurable, attainable, reportable, and time bound. And that time bound is the one that I really like to emphasize the most. How can we want to ensure, if our goal is eradicating hunger in New Haven County, maybe the time bound way to start measuring that is we've reduced the number of kids in schools that report going home hungry. Right? So does that mean we're eradicating hunger as a whole? No, but it means that we know what one step is on the journey to eradicate hunger. And so the reason there are whole professionals dedicated to only this, and I have a member of my team that this is all she does is work on success metrics, is because modern donors care about this so much. They are excited about impact and they want to know, as I mentioned, that the social ROI of their gift is as high as it can be, right? So I want to know that I'm investing in solving local hunger. I want to know that I'm investing in solving the problem or the challenge of stray animals in my community. And once you know what your success is, then being able to start communicating the progress that you're making is a key part of a donor's strategy. Because say you ran a campaign, a big campaign, let's again go with the example of the animal shelter, so that you do a huge catch and release program for a few months. And so you have your donors donate so that you can buy all these new cages and do this massive outreach for catch and release. And then at the end of it, you start surveying people and you notice maybe the kitten population is not as big this year as it was last year. That's success. That's huge. You have way fewer stray kittens that are being observed in the neighborhood. That then you go back to your donors and say, thank you for everything that you gave in this campaign. Your money made a difference. We were able to reduce the cat population by this much. Can we count on your donation again? Because we'd like to run this campaign again, or we're going to do now even more work. So when you define success and then communicate your success, that speaks to what many donors are wanting to see and hear. And then the next step. So this is where all of our finance folks, we need to work with our finance team and understand how much our programs cost. There are material, space, and human costs to almost everything that we do. Even if it's a completely virtual program, there's still the space of where the computers are. There's the human cost. And a note about human cost. if you are a volunteer executive director, a volunteer development director, that there's still a human cost. You're the one bearing it, right? Even though the organization isn't paying you, think about what you should be paid. That is the human cost. Everybody's time has value. Your time has value. So when we're thinking about building costs for our programs, how can we build it so that we value the entire team's time? And if you don't have the budget for payroll quite yet, this is how we're building our case for support, right? We're building the case that to run this program in a way that's sustainable, we need to be able to pay our people. And so that is the human cost in this program. Granted, you might have donated space, you might have donated materials. Articulate that. Say we have a wonderful donor that has allowed us to use the second floor of their office space completely for free. So we need your help to outfit it. Articulating what you have and what you still need is a key part of understanding your costs. So what are the various costs to run these programs? And make sure that you understand all the pieces of them. Don't forget paper is one thing that I like to say. We build these wonderful budgets and we think about all these complex things and then we forget the cost of printer paper, and then we're scrambling. So when you're thinking about your program costs, write it out, ask other people, ask your finance person, ask a friend, do you think I'm missing anything? And then, so once you have your success metrics, then you have your costs, your true costs. Again, I'm emphasizing real costs. And that includes your time, even if your time is currently being donated. Let's connect success to the cost. And you have created your case for support. So as I mentioned before, you can say, if we're going to run this giant campaign for after school lunches, we want to go to every single after school program in the New Haven area and deliver free snacks because we think that will reduce childhood hunger. This is how much the snacks cost. This is how much the transportation to all of these programs cost. This is the staff time that it would take to run this. And then our outcome is happy, not hungry children that are able to participate in these after school programs in a better way. That connects the cost of the program to the outcome, not to the activity, but to the outcome, which is happy, healthy children in a measurable way. Obviously, that happy, healthy children is not a SMART goal. It is a lofty one. So think about how that can be measurable and how it can be time bound. So we have those three pillars or three steps. We've defined our success and our metrics. We've defined our costs for that program, and we've connected our costs to our outcomes. So we know that it's a solid case if it's clear. Can your board and fundraising team articulate your mission and vision, your case for support? And if you ask every single board member to articulate it and they all say it differently, that's a good opportunity to sit down with you and the board and say, okay, let's learn together. Maybe the way one person says it is actually really compelling and you hadn't thought about it before. So check in with your board and your fundraising team if you're all communicating things the same way. Also make sure that it's consistent on every single media outlet. This is really important, especially in modern fundraising. You're going to have a donor that will find you on Instagram. Maybe that's where they originally see you, and then they go to your website. Well, your Instagram is updated with all your new wonderful language, but your website's still old. Try to connect the two, because if donors see an Instagram page that articulates their impact and the passion that they have for this program, but then they go to your website and all of the language is different, that will turn off donors and you will lose that connection. So try to, and I completely understand. I was talking to a client about this the other day. Once you've been in operation for a long time, there are going to be disparate marketing materials all over the internet. That maybe your logo looked this way one year and it looks completely different another year, and you can't control the internet. You know, you can go to, what is it, archive.org, I think, and search any page and what it looked like, 15 years ago. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about your sort of modern, what you're using as your marketing, what social media platforms you're using, how your website looks, and whether or not those are all connected to each other. Transparency. If you're creating a case for support and you say, okay, it's going to cost us $10,000 to run this program, we need your help to get there. And a donor asks, okay, why? Can I see some of your financial reports? Can I see how much this program cost in the past? And you don't have information to share with them. Again, this is not going to build trust. You're going to find that younger and savvier donors will just say, okay, well then I'll find something else. And then also you're data driven. Making bold claims sounds really good in a presentation. In a pitch deck, and you're in a pitch competition, you make bold claims. You say, I'm going to disrupt the market and I'm going to change the way we think about catch and release programs for cats. But if you can't back that up with data or how you're going to measure that, then again, your case for support starts to crumble. So the next part of the building blocks of a solid, resilient fund development plan, thinking about the people that are a part of it. You're going to have a fundraising plan this year. You're going to have another one next year and another one year after that. But your people are the ones who drive it. And your people are the ones that endure. I like to say, honor your capacity. Think about the team that you have, not the team that you want. Thinking about the team that you want is a wonderful exercise. Create a vision board. It's a wonderful project to do. I love it. But when we're talking about fundraising, let's leave our vision boards a little bit onto the side when we're talking about our people. What is the experience level of your board, of your fundraisers? I used the example earlier of, don't plan a black tie annual gala if you've never done that before. But say you have a new volunteer who their background is in event management. They planned weddings for years and now they found your organization. They're super excited about it. If you have someone who has that experience, that desire and drive, honor it and say, okay, we've never done a black tie gala before, but maybe that's something we'll think about because you have the experience. So always think about experience and then the hours to give. So you have this person who is a prior wedding planner, but they can only give a couple hours a month. If the rest of your team can't pick up that slack, honor their experience, find a creative way to bring them in for that hour a month, but maybe understand that it's not something that you can do right now. And highlight the skills and expertise of your current team. One thing that if you have somebody who, and this is a common refrain that I hear with fundraising teams, I feel really, really weird about asking. I feel uncomfortable with it, but I will, type up letters all day long. Figure out what everybody's expertise and comfort levels are. If, however, you have a whole team and everyone says I'm uncomfortable with asking and all I want to do is write letters, again, let's honor our capacity and say, all right, maybe we need to get some training. Maybe we need to connect with our sister organization and see how they are asking. So first step is do an internal audit, understand your capacity so that you know where to go next. And the last thing is past performance. If you're a new nonprofit and you've never fundraised before, this one might be not as helpful, but if you have done a fundraiser and it was really successful, how can we repeat that? Or if you did a fundraiser that wasn't successful, maybe that's not where you want to devote your time. So I like to pause on the success part and emphasize that we should focus on bright spots. There's a wonderful book, if you haven't read it, about bright spots and using that as a change management philosophy. There's a lot of individuals in project management in this world that will say, well, we need to do a SWOT analysis and we need to think about our weaknesses, what are our threats. And I like to think about, well, what are our strengths? What are our opportunities? What has gone really, really well in the past? And how can we replicate it and make it bigger? So again, you have someone that's like, no, and this happens with board members all the time. We really need to do this annual gala. Other organizations I sit on the board of, they do this annual gala and it's really successful. But for your community, maybe a potluck. You did a potluck fundraiser last year. It was great. Everyone came together. It was really fun. How can you take that, replicate it, and make it a little bit bigger so you can invite other donors, other individuals within the community? So start with your bright spots and build them. And start with the successes and the strengths of your team and find ways to leverage them. So when we're talking about leveraging, I have this slide here with a giant asterisk. Leverage fundraising tools with caution. I have implemented, there are new ones every day, so I can't say I've implemented every single CRM there is on the market. I've implemented the big ones, and I would probably successfully say I've either implemented or managed 90% of CRM systems that exist for nonprofits. They are all wonderful. They are all terrible. 100%. So a tool is only as good as the individual that's using it, and it's only as good as the utility of that tool. You don't need a hammer for everything. Neither do you need a screwdriver for everything. So when, this is a question I get from boards, this is a question I get from clients all the time. Well, what is the best system that we can use? The best system is one that you can implement and manage on your own. If you do not have a full-time Salesforce administrator on your staff, I would not recommend implementing Salesforce. I only recommend creating a system that matches the people that can manage it. And another thing that we like to say is garbage in, garbage out. If you put data into your system and it's not organized, it's not clear, the reports that are going to come out of your system aren't that useful. If you don't have the time and energy to implement a system well, the system that you're going to get at the end of the implementation will be terrible. I've had 2 clients on Salesforce, one who loved it, one who hated it and decided after they spent thousands of dollars implementing it, nobody touched it. The difference was the way that it was implemented, not the tool itself. So you can leverage a tool, but understand that you have to manage it at the end of the day. And if you don't have the capacity to, it's not going to be helpful. And so the first thing that I like to say is look at your processes and systems that you're using right now. What's working, what's not. Again, focus on bright spots and find a tool that works within that. The other thing that I see often with clients when it comes to implementing a new CRM, talking about using some new tool and that's going to propel their fundraising to the next level, they forget about the things that are working in their current tool. That they forget that, oh, in our current system, yeah, sure, it's only spreadsheets, but our board member knows those spreadsheets really, really well. They've figured out how to use them and they have a system. So they always reach out to the same people every year and they always re-up that 10K, 5K, etc. donation. You implement this new tool, the board member who's been doing this can't use it, wasn't able to attend all of the training sessions. And now your lead fundraiser is stymied because they're sort of locked out of this new system. So again, start with your bright spots. What's working with your team, what's working within your tools. How can we leverage the systems that we have to build those people up? And remember that a new system implementation is going to take time away from your current team. I've been hired on multiple occasions and told, we don't have time to do this, so we just want you to do everything. And those are always the engagements that give me the most worry, because if you're not a part of the implementation, then at the end you're given a tool that works for me, but maybe it won't work for you. So leverage tools with caution. All right. Last and not least, definitely not least, understand your donors. And this goes back to the tool part a little bit, because I know that when I start this conversation, I've received a lot of anxiety when I've done this workshop in the past. How am I supposed to get all this information about my donors? I use PayPal. PayPal only gives me their name and their email address. Take this as a piece of homework, please. If you do nothing else from this presentation, your homework is understanding your donor base. Where do they live? What are their ages, the genders, their gender identity, their racial identity, their ethnic identity? What languages do they speak? How did they find you? Why are they excited about the work that you're doing? Some people have asked, well, isn't that invasive? You know, are they going to want to answer these questions? Some people maybe not, but again, let's remember that modern giving is relational. People gave to you because they were connected to the work that you're doing in some way. And they want you to get to know them. They want to build a relationship with your organization. It's like dating, right? You maybe don't ask, do you want to get married and have kids on the first date? But, you know, how did you find us? Like, are you connected to anyone in the organization? You know, we are wanting to hold giving circles in certain areas of Connecticut. Can we know, you know, what neighborhood you live in? Another good excuse is, we are trying to send thank you cards to all of our donors. Can we have your address? So there are creative ways that you can reach out to your donor community and start to find more about them, so that you can understand who they are and their motivations. The reason to do this is because, as I said, the traditional donor pyramid of someone gives a few dollars and then they give up, and then once they give maybe over $100, that's when you reach out to them. That model really is being turned on its head. So the way that you can get to, the more that you can get to know your donors and understand who they are and build that relationship, they could circumvent that whole pyramid and jump up. And give you even more just because you want to get to know who they are. So an exercise that I like to do after you've started to get to know your donors is creating a donor persona, or multiple donor personas. It's a really fun exercise. You can do this in a workshop with your board and your key fundraising staff. And it has wonderful effects for the rest of your fundraising strategy, because it becomes this very personal anchor. So what is a donor persona? If you have worked in a sales organization, you might also know this as a client persona or a customer journey. But the idea is, it's a fictional representation of your donor, but down to the detail, their age, where they went to school, where they live. It's fictional, but it should be representative of either your ideal donor or your current donors. I normally like to do both. I think 5 is a really good number to start with. 3 that are very current, 3 personas that you can identify within your ecosystem, and 2 maybe that you want to create in your outreach strategy. And the reason I like to do these is because it helps you stay focused. Again, let's go back to the black tie event. And you create these donor personas and you realize our current donors, none of them would actually go to a black tie event. They love potlucks or they love community events. So once you have your donor personas identified, you can then start to create outreach strategies based on the persona. And when you create a fictional representation of an ideal donor, state the assumptions that you're making and check in on them. So I like to do this exercise once a year with some of my clients. We look at their donor personas after we've created the 5. A year later, we check in and we say, okay, how many of this persona did we have? How many of this persona? We created this one as an ideal. What was held true about that person? Or maybe what do we need to change about our persona? And here is an example of a donor persona card. The slides will be shared out with everybody at the end of this, so you can have this as an example. And it's, you give this person a fictitious name. I love to build these where I have a picture as well. There are many, many websites that have stock photos, so you can use it. And you say, what do we think Esther would like? She always donates to us. She also volunteers once every Sunday. She's excited about our work because, maybe you're a music organization and she used to be a piano teacher. You say, okay, why is she, who is she? What are her goals in life? Her goal is, now that she's retired, she wants to give back to her community and keep utilizing her skills. She's frustrated by a lack of music investment in schools. She's frustrated that, public access to music has gone down. So then what are her motivations? Maybe she's motivated by friends and family. She loves her grandkids, and so she's motivated to support anything that they're into. These personality bars are fun and helpful to understand. Is she really, really passionate? Is she going to be really friendly? Because then when you're thinking about your Esters, so who are all of the Esters in your donor community? They would love an in-person event because they're very friendly, they're very passionate and outgoing. And so if you have a bunch of Esters, who are the Esters you can invite to this event? But maybe if you don't have that many Esters in your group, maybe a virtual event is going to be something that would be received a bit better. And the other thing that is really important for us to think about is, for this persona, how do they like to be contacted? And this is the part that can be the most illuminating for sustainability. So you put together 3 different personas and all 3 of them like to be contacted different ways. One likes text, one likes direct mail, the other ones are all on social media. If you have a small team, managing 3 outreach strategies like that can be very difficult. So maybe you prioritize your donors right now that are on social media because you have this amazing social media intern. They're going to be with you for the next year while they're in school. And so that's something that you can now emphasize. Or that exact opposite, you just don't have anybody on staff that can routinely update Instagram. So if you have a donor persona that's their preferred contact method, maybe you understand that you're not going to be able to build a strategy for them. So after you understand your personas, a good part of that exercise is understanding your donations. Remember when I said bright spots? What has worked in the past? Think about the gift types you have received. If it's stock, if it's cash, if it's grants, how many have you received in certain value brackets? If you have a financial system, you should be able to pull this information and look at snippets in time. Don't just look at the past 2 years. Look at 2 years, look at 1 year, look at 6 months. If your donations ebb and flow, like many of ours do, based on the cycle of your programming and the cycle of the year, say, okay, we get a lot of cash donations that are $10 in Q1 of the year, January to March. But then in November, we get a lot of cash donations that are higher. This is doing these sorts of audits on a regular basis help also emphasize where you should target your efforts. If you've never gotten a stock donation before, if you don't even know what a stock donation will look like, how to accept it, you don't have a relationship with a bank where you can then transfer the asset to your name, It's okay to say we just don't accept stock donations right now. And again, if you see that grants are going to be the largest section that you get, your only big donations are happening within your grants, that is a good way to say, all right, we want to double the number of cash donations in this spot and this spot to offset our grants. Hopefully, like I said, you can get this information out of your financial system, work with your finance team to put this type of table together. These ranges are going to be what makes sense for you all. So if your highest gift is $10,000, then maybe create ranges that are in line with how your gifts are distributed. So let's put this all together. Everything that we just talked about, the whole last hour and change of a presentation, distilled to 5 easy steps. This was the goal. How do you evaluate gift vehicles? How do you evaluate and understand that something works as a part of your fund development plan? Question number 1, does it align with our values and the values of our community? Really great example I have of this is I was working with a client, a board member really wanted to have this fundraiser at their country club. Their country club's mascot was a very old image of an Indigenous individual. And that did not align with the values of the organization. And they were able to articulate back to this board member, hi, unfortunately, we really appreciate that we want to do this for us, but our core values are this. How can we change this or use this as a conversation point? Second, are you able to connect the ask with the why? So if you're doing a campaign, is there a clear why? Are you able to say how and why that campaign or this gift or whatever it is you're doing connects with what your organization needs? If someone donates you a boat and you have no idea how to dispose of it, and it doesn't actually support your programming and it doesn't create impact, this is a good way, again, to say, thank you. Maybe there's something else we can do with this. And dovetail to that, does your team have the experience, capacity, and desire to manage whatever it is, to manage an event, to manage a grant? This is a great question when we're talking about grants. If you don't have anyone that is experienced in government grant reporting, I would highly caution doing it. And then does this resonate with my donor persona or personas? Is this something that my donor community would be excited about? And has this been successful in the past? If it's something that you've never done, but it's been successful for a partner or sister organization, that's a good way to say, we've never done it, but Joe has down the street and it went really well for them. So maybe this is something that we should do. And so if all of these are aligned, then yes, let's go, let's do it. Otherwise, maybe next time. Maybe it's something that we shelve, we put in the parking lot, what I like to say. Always put ideas in parking lots. Doesn't mean they're going away. It just means we're going to come back to them at a later date. So a little preview about what's to come next, and then I'm going to open up questions. The next presentation is about moving towards relational and responsive fundraising, how we can work with individuals in this new responsive and relational model that I've been talking about, and how we can move towards this donor cycle as opposed to thinking about the donor pyramid. So it's a little plug if you're interested in this for our next session, which I think will be in about a month. So a giant thank you. I am here and there are numerous, I think, questions in the chat. So I will now turn my focus to the chat and I'd love to answer any and all questions that you have. We have a little less than 15 minutes. If we don't get to everything, please come to my office hours. Like I said, they are free, open to the public from now until the end of June.
Thank you so much, Roz. So we don't have any questions that came in through the chat. So I want to invite anyone, if you have any questions, please feel free to send those questions into the chat. You can also take yourself off mute and ask the question. I do want to mention a couple things. I dropped the link to the responsive and relational fundraising workshop that's scheduled for April 4th in the chat. If you have not already registered for that workshop, please do. I also want to mention that on April 25th, we have our Finding a Path to Major Gifts and Planned Gifts workshop. You can also register for that session on our website. And then in June, we have our Purposeful Boards Powerful Fundraising Workshop. This is a session that we have offered in the past. It is highly sought after and it fills up every year. So if you have not already registered, please do that. The Purposeful Boards Powerful Fundraising Workshop will be held in person, while the other two will be on a virtual presentation style with Zoom. So thank you everyone for participating and attending today's session. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. Take yourself off mute.
Hi, Roz. A quick question. In one of the first screens, you indicated the percentages of where funding came from. Individuals 70%, bequeaths 9.6 and such. What is the trend? Because a couple of organizations I'm involved with are really pushing for people to bequeath their life insurance monies or whatever to a specific organization. So do you have a feeling for how the trends are?
That's an excellent question, and that highlights boomers. And that if your donor personas are boomers and you have a lot within that population, then yes, you should have a planned giving and a bequeath strategy, because that is becoming more and more a topic of conversation. And so that's why I like to say with your personas. So the boomers were the largest generation, and now the millennials are. So one of the challenges is anything that boomers do is offset by the millennial trends. So bequeaths are going up because boomers are interested in them, but you're not going to see those numbers shift too much because of millennial giving.
Thank you.
But great question.
Hi, Rosalind. Thank you. This has been a really great presentation. I just had a question was hoping for some perspective. Our agency's pie graph looks very different than the general one that you shared with where individuals are heavy. And we are historically a very grant heavy focused, because that is where our skill set from our staff lie with the federal and state. But as we look to diversify our fundraising and look to the individuals, do you have any advice on where to look to make those? We have one event, we have some of that started, but it's really small, but we also have a small team. So what would your advice be for an agency like ours that's looking to start growing our individual, and where we can make that most impact? Is something I'm considering right now.
That's a wonderful question, and one that I actually receive at least weekly. So my response is always talk to your current donors, even if there are only 5 of them. If you have 5 people that have given for whatever reason, talk to them. And especially if it's only a small group of people, you're in such a great space where you can take them out to coffee, maybe do a little roundtable, a Zoom meeting, depending on who they are, and just say, we love your support. We're so thankful. We are looking to increase the work that we do. Do you have a few minutes to talk to us? That'll help you get an understanding of who your current personas are. And then usually from doing that, you create your ideal from having that conversation. So, maybe all of your donors are just because they're one person removed from your organization. That's usually what's happening at an organization like yours. But you find out in these conversations, oh, everybody that we're working with or that are donors have kids. For some reason, we resonate really well with young parents. And then that creates, okay, we're going to do some events where people can bring their kids. And that'll be a good way to not only bring our current donors there, because you'll need your current donors in whatever strategy you're building, and then they can bring their friends, right? And you now have first, your first degree of separation, your second degree of separation, and then you can continue to grow. So talk to your donors. I love talking to donors. They're awesome.
Me too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Rosalind. I had a question. We historically, I think we're probably like most nonprofits, and much of our funding leans towards grants. We've historically had one major donor from the state, and I'd love to understand strategies to reconnect with past donors, especially individual donors, and of all economic tiers,
Mm.
if there's a difference there.
You might say that there would be a difference, but again, I like to emphasize what are people interested in more than what their giving tier was. But that's I'm working with another client right now that has a large number of individuals that donated 2 years ago or later that they have not engaged with. And my first suggestion is thank them. They probably, as I mentioned, they either didn't feel engaged or they didn't feel thanked for whatever reason. So a good way is bring up their old donation if you have it in a system and say, we loved that you gave us a gift 5 years ago that made a huge impact. We'd like to tell you all of the things that we're up to right now. Like this client of mine just built this beautiful newsletter that said, and it only is directed to the individuals that donated 2 years ago or older. And it was, look at what we're doing now. You might not have seen us recently, but these are all the amazing things that we've accomplished in the past 2 years. These are the programs. Here's the team. Get to know us. So it depends on who they are, whether they would resonate with email, maybe they would resonate with a phone call. But update them and thank them for being involved in some way. And then you can begin that conversation. But start it with a thank you and an update. Don't start it with, we'd really like that $10,000 donation again. Of course you would, and they know you would. Most people are aware that you're going to ask for money, but they'd like to have their heartstrings pulled a little bit before that ask comes in.
Sure. Thank you.
You're welcome. These are all wonderful questions.
Any more questions? Okay. Well, thank you again for joining us today. We will be following up today's workshop with an email. You will receive that email from me. There will be a copy of the slide deck attached to the email. And then I will also include the link to the survey that was dropped in the chat. Please provide us with feedback. It is very helpful. It is something that we use all the feedback when it comes to planning for future offerings, both this year and next year. So please take 2 to 3 minutes to answer the survey. But thank you all for joining today's workshop. Really appreciate it. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.
Thank you.